Before today's topic, a quick disclaimer. The stories and data we share come from the states that we practice in and the experiences we personally had, which can differ greatly across our country and certainly the globe. This is not a professional advice show, so get comfy and let's discuss death.
Hello and welcome to MortMic, a down-to-earth discussion on death and dying. I'm Jem.
And I'm Red, and we are your alternative option ash artificers this week. So if you haven't heard part one, we did a nice little intro last month on things to do with cremated remains. We went over some basics on interring urns in the ground or in a mausoleum at a cemetery. We talked about scattering, some really good information there, because a lot of questions pop up with scattering and the options and legalities there within. But this week, we are going to delve a lot more into the quirky and unique side of options for cremated remains after you take them home.
I am so excited. There's so many weird things that are coming out that you can do with your cremated remains. And they're all just so exciting and cool and extremely personalized to the individual.
And the most exciting thing about it, I think, is that even this list that we give you, it's not a complete list. It's some really good stuff, but there's still probably stuff out there that I didn't even find. And even in 5 years, who knows what'll be available then too.
Exactly.
So I feel like one of the more common things to do with urns that you take home is to create gemstones out of them.
To create me-stones?
Me-stones.
Just kidding. That's a bad joke that I use way too often.
So it's a really super scientific process, of course. We love a good scientific explanation here on MortMic. So these gemstones are actually lab-grown stones made from cremated remains. And how it's done is that the carbon that we've talked about this multiple times before, that's really the base of what cremated remains are, is carbon. The carbon is extracted from the cremated remains, and they can even use hair and things like that have a high concentration of carbon. This carbon is then heated at super high temperatures, and from that, graphite is then extracted. When they then add more heat and more pressure, just like every other naturally existing gemstone is formed, they basically do that in a lab. They create that same heat and pressure environment, and that's what's used to form the final diamond. After that, it's just cutting it to your specific parameters and polishing it and setting it in whatever type of jewelry that you have selected.
I feel like this is because it could, jewelry is a very romantic thing, but the fact that it's your dead loved one is then there, I don't know, it could be kind of cool to some people, but I'm still on the fence about this one, to be honest.
Yeah, not for you. Do you feel the same way about cremation jewelry that just has a little bit of cremains in it too? Just in a little chamber?
I feel like that's different in a way, and I don't know why. I can't explain anything like that.
I feel like I know where you're coming from, though. Jewelry is a very personal type thing, which I feel is why so many people like it. But I guess it is kind of interesting where it's just the only person that you'd expect to get jewelry from is a significant other or a spouse or partner. And so for this to be a gift to yourself of your dead loved one's body parts, it's a little metal, honestly.
Yeah, I guess it would be kind of cool if there was a family heirloom piece and you pass it down to your kids and they have this ring and they're this is my grandma, you know what I mean, or my great grandma, whatever. It is a very, very interesting way to memorialize someone in a way that it's easy to pass it down and it's a desirable thing. No one wants an urn, but everyone wants a ring or a cool pendant or something like that.
See, I want to see the family heirloom that it basically has facets on it to add more as people pass in the family. It's like, someday you too will be added to the ring, you know?
That's some like high fantasy, like Crypt Keeper, like
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So when they make these diamonds, not a whole lot of cremated remains is necessary to create them. Pretty much like 8 ounces or less is needed. Like when I checked out like a bunch of different companies, and like some actually only needed like about 2 ounces. So like at most you're looking at maybe half a pound or 2 ounces. Like it's so like minute. So if you even still wanted to do something with like the big majority of the cremated remains, like you only have to give up a little bit to be able to create something like this.
And I've never actually seen any of these pieces in person, so I don't know if you've seen like anyone do this actually, Red.
So we do contract with a company, a specific company at my funeral home, and it's actually kind of a more recent thing. In like the last year, we brought them on, and I've never sold this to anybody, but I know like my manager, like he had a hot streak where he sold like 3 to families, and so like I've never got to see the actual product come into us because they actually get sent to the family directly, but like they don't look different. Like they look like a gemstone. Like you wouldn't be able to be like, oh, that's got cremated remains in it. Like you had no idea. It looks like any other, you know, gem. Or I imagine a jeweler like could probably tell, but like for somebody else, like no, they would have no idea.
Isn't it that the diamond ends up being like this yellow color? Is that like common?
So actually they can like, you can pick the color that you want, but the shade can change. So it can be like a colorless diamond like you're familiar with, or there can be colors like green, like reds and pinks, blue, stuff like that. But yeah, like the thing that they can't control is the shade, because it could be a very like light blue, it could be a super dark like navy blue, and that actually depends on the person and basically their like
makeup?
Very molecular. Yeah, their molecular makeup.
That's kind of interesting. Cool.
Yeah,
it's like, am I going to be a dark diamond or a light diamond?
Right, exactly.
Wow, I wonder what like, and me, the science nerd, I'm like, I wonder what like molecular compounds are like to make that up or depend on that. That's so cool.
Yeah, right. Tiny science. So this process does take like a considerable amount of time. Like from the companies that I checked out, like some said they could do it in 3 months, others took 6 to 9, some took 7 to 10. So it is a pretty lengthy process overall. It's not like just Amazon ordering a necklace that you put cremated remains into a chamber in. Like this will take some time. They are growing a diamond in a lab. It will take some time.
I was gonna say something like this is definitely worth it to wait for that if you're going this route, I feel.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like even for people that are getting like custom rings done at a jeweler for, I don't know, like a wedding or whatever, like it's going to take time for them. Like this is like, these are artisans. Like this is a legitimate, like it's a crazy industry by itself without cremated remains, involved.
Yeah.
The company that we work with, actually, we had like this big webinar where they explained more of the process to us. And since it does take so long, and I know that can be like have people chomping at the bit waiting for it, they'll give like updates along the way. So like they'll send pictures like, hey, this is like the lab specimen, like what we got the carbon from, we got to this part in the process, next part of the process is like the heat and pressure. So like they actually send like updates to the families along the way, which I thought was really cool and keeps them super involved in the process for something that, is out of their hands. I like that a lot.
It's just nice to know too that like you're getting like an authentic product. There's like for every 10 people, there's one guy that's going to be like, how do you know they don't just replace it with a regular diamond? You know what I mean? So
right, exactly. But with something like this, it's not going to be an option for everybody's price point, especially just as diamonds themselves are extremely expensive. This too is very expensive. I think on the lower end, it's like prices start at like 15, 20 grand or something. Like
wow.
It's a lot of money to do.
All right,
this.
you bougie people out there. Get these
Right.
diamonds and show me what it looks like.
Right. And that is definitely why I haven't really been able to sell this yet, because, on one hand, you got your $30 earn for Amazon, and on the other hand, 20 grand diamonds. It's like, oof, no. My big worry is like, you're going to spend so much money on something like this. Like, I lose rings all the time. Like, like how traumatic would that be to lose, I lost grandma ring. I lost the grandma ring.
I lost grandma ring. I lost grandma ring. Yep. That's so funny. But unfortunate. Definitely don't lose grandma, please. There are some more less losable objects that you can put your beloved's cremains into that are equally as interesting.
A lot of really cool options, especially for creative types as well. So for those that are out there that are music lovers, or maybe shared a special bond with their deceased loved one in music, whether it's making it or listening to it, I found a really cool company out in the UK, and it is the only company that does this, that has figured out the process to add cremated remains to a vinyl puck before they form it into a vinyl record disc.
This is really cool. One of my best friends in college, undergrad, he was a vinyl collector and he was really into it. And he came to me and he was like, I want this when I die. I want my cremains pressed into a vinyl record, because he found the company. So this has been around for I don't want to age myself, but quite a while. So it is a really cool process, because, a vinyl disc that music is played on, for all those kids that listen to our show now, it's a piece of plastic, and the music is pressed into the plastic disc, and then a needle picks up, the bumps and makes the sound waves and all that technical jargon, blah, blah, blah. If you put your cremains into plastic, they're in there, and, you are a part of this object.
There's a lot of customization available with this too. And actually, depending on the color of the vinyl that you select, you can actually see the cremated remains in the record itself, which is really cool. So
that is so cool.
The old telephones and Game Boys that you could see through the plastic. If it's any type of transparent plastic like that, you can see the little granules of cremated remains inside of it.
Ooh.
And depending on the size of those ashes that are added to the vinyl, it actually can change the sound of the tracks too, depending on how it makes the needle jump, which is kind of cool. So it's your loved one is remixing live that song that you had them press into it.
That's so cool. Or the vinyl crackle that you get, if you're listening to an old vinyl, something like that, or a skip or something like this. That is really, really cool. I really like this.
Yeah, definitely. And you can have it be whatever music or sound that you want. They'll accept whatever, MP3 file that you send to them. But something else to consider would be it could be any sound wave. It could be a recording from a video, or, a recording of your loved one's voice, a voice message that they left on your phone, or in a home movie or something. So you could have it playing with their cremated remains inside of it. So it's super, super personal option. You get about 20 minutes per side, so you can kind of go crazy with how many songs that you want on there. And it doesn't take a whole lot of cremated remains. About a teaspoon is what they require to be able to do this. And about a month, which is actually super fast, considering I think this sounds like a complicated process personally.
Yeah. Do you know what the cost would be for something like this? Is that on their website?
So if you're looking into this option, it's not the cheapest thing in the world. The prices range from about $1,200 to $4,000, depending on, are you using both sides, how long, what kind of customization are you doing to the actual sleeve, that kind of thing. But I mean, overall, to have a keepsake like this is one of the most personal things I feel like you can do. So I don't think that's an outrageous price for something like this.
Yeah, I was going to say, for something like this, compared to Mr. Diamond, that was $15,000 versus I don't know, a traditional funeral is anywhere from 6 to, I don't know, upwards grand. this is very doable for, if you have the money, and then if this is something that matters to the deceased or even to you. I feel like, 1,400 to, what did you say?
It was like 1,200 to 4,000.
1,200 to 4,000, really, I think it's worth it. I would highly consider it if this was an option for me.
Yeah, me too, definitely. So something that a lot of people are probably familiar with cremated remains is that they can be incorporated into blown glass. And there's so many different glassware options for glass blowing that, I mean, the options are endless, essentially, for what you can incorporate them into. So you can do things as simple as like paperweights that range to like sculptures, jewelry, vases, ornaments. I mean, really, whatever. Anything that's made of glass, you can definitely incorporate cremated remains into it. Only around a spoonful is added during the process to bespeckle the piece with the cremated remains, and every piece comes out uniquely and differently based on the cremated remains that are in it. Depending on the color of the cremated remains, could change the look of the piece after it's created. It's super cool. I mean, I don't know about you. I've definitely watched a lot of like glass blowing videos and things like that. I think it's extremely fascinating.
And then that's another, like, kind of, instead of having like a beautiful urn, have like a beautiful little glass, ball or like art piece or like whatever you want.
Because I feel like some more that urns kind of lack in their ability to be like a beautiful piece. Because I mean, if you're taking home an urn, it's sitting on a shelf, it's sitting on a place of prominence, sitting somewhere that is to be displayed. And urns are like kind of lame looking, like even like they're really like quote unquote pretty, pieces that have like the vase shaped to the urn. And so like, I just think they're, exactly what it is when you look at it. And sometimes they're kind of eyesores. Like honestly, a lot of the ones that we sell, I'm just like, ugh, like I don't even like how they look. So to be able to have like a sculpture, like a little bird or like an animal that your loved one liked, or something beautiful in nature, like I feel like that's a lot more personal and also looks better to be displayed.
And considering if you want to have your loved ones cremains as a part of your home decor, without having like this big, like awkward, ugly, very like apparent urn on your mantle place or whatever, you can also get them painted into a painting. So if you are of the creative nature, or if you like having art pieces in your home, this is something that you can pay someone else to do, or something that you can even do yourself. Like I said before in our previous episode, cremains are just carbon. They're just material. They're just, texture. If you add cremains to paints, any sort of medium, they are going to become part of that medium. And, once this dries, or, once you apply to something and it sets, like they're just going to be a part of that item now. So, putting your loved one's cremains or your own cremains into paint, into any sort of like liquid medium like this, that you can use that to paint, and then, voila, you have a cremains painting, which is really cool. This can kind of really apply to anything. And we kind of talked about like the legality of cremains, like doing what you want with them. They're, the deceased body is pseudo property, therefore the cremains are your cremains to do with them as you please. Pretty much. So you can kind of mix your cremains into anything, really. And one thing that I have read before that is really interesting as well, and I cannot find the article to save my life, but I remember reading this when I was in undergrad, because I went to undergrad for music, is that you can put your cremains in like a varnish, and then you can varnish a musical instrument with this. So,
oh, no way.
Yeah. So if your loved one was like a cellist or like a violinist, or, any sort of like wooden musical instrument, even like a piano, I imagine, you can put like their cremains in a varnish and then just like varnish the instrument with that, essentially, you know, incorporating the cremains into the actual instrument like that you can eventually play.
I think that it's such a versatile thing, like that they can be added to any liquid like that, or like if you're like you work with clay, or you're a sculptor, or you make like ceramics and things like that. Like you can just you put them in anything.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's lovely. Anything you can do, all you creative types out there, really just like let your imagination run wild. There's probably someone that's done it before. You can like Google it or whatever, but there's really a lot of cool things you can do in terms of like mixing cremains into like mediums or anything like this.
There was actually, my partner was telling me about somebody that worked a Ren fair or something, that this person actually did like blown glass with like donated cremated remains, like unclaimed cremated remains. So these people could be like glass plugs for people to wear in their ears and stuff like that. So they basically like they wanted to be able to travel and continue their journey through somebody else, essentially. So it's like be able to come along with somebody else through their life. Like I thought that was really cool from like a stranger's perspective. Like these people that had no connection, but like they wanted to be carried on through someone else's life. That was like awesome to me. Somebody's out there doing that.
I really do like that because, you know, unclaimed cremains are so sad, but it is a really common thing where, you know, say someone gets cremated and then the family like never comes and gets them because they don't really care. That definitely happens all the time. And so these funeral homes are full of just these like shelves and shelves of cremains. And to be able to take that and make it into something that someone wants and be like, hey, I have this cool piece of jewelry that is a stranger's ashes. And now it's like, I take it with me everywhere and I wear it everywhere. That's like putting new meaning and purpose to this person. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, they even included like a little card or whatever, like of who the person was. So like, you know who you're wearing, and like that's like, wow.
That's really awesome. Moving on to my least favorite option. I hate this.
What do you hate so much, Jem?
Well, this is like the one thing that, I don't know, people, I think maybe because it was like a Facebook post and it got viral and it like went around, and I'm sure everyone has seen it, but the tree pods that you like put your cremains into, and then a tree magically grows out of the pod and you become the tree. This is not true, and it's not scientifically accurate, and it makes me so mad. Because it's, you know, okay, so listen, guys. Your body ashes are carbon. There's like 0 nutrients really in them. You are not helping any plants grow. Whatever happens to you, wherever you go, you are not fodder for like beautiful plant life. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. So the fact that they have marketed this item, it's like a cup, it's like a cardboard or biodegradable cup that you put your ashes into, and then you're supposed to plant it into the ground, and this beautiful tree is going to sprout forth from the earth, and that is your loved one. That's what the advertisement is. And that is completely false, because it's just a tree. And then your ashes are kind of like in the ground underneath the tree, which is okay. Like maybe that's what you want and that's fine, but you're not the tree. You're not. And it makes me so mad, because that's the only thing that people like to talk about when it comes to cremains and like alternative burials. They're always like, oh, what about the tree pod? And I'm like, nah, F the tree pod.
Essentially, the basic science of it is that, like, since cremated remains have, and plant nerds out here that know things about soil will understand, cremated remains have high pH and they have a lot of salt in them, which these things are both extremely bad for sprouting plants. So not even just trees, like if you're planning on sprinkling grandma in the garden that she tended to, like if there's new plants coming up, you have to be very careful about that, because it can kill them. Creates a very bad environment for them to grow. So like Jem was saying, like, the same thing can be achieved by just, if you're gonna have a tree planted, like an already sprouted tree, if you just put the cremated remains in the hole that you dug for the tree, Like it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, you don't have to have like an advertised tree pod that you spend like, I think it's like a couple $100 on to like do that. You can just do it.
Right. There are kits out there that can help neutralize the cremated remains to make them more palatable to plants, but the actual neutralization of cremated remains, it's a process that takes months to convert them to a usable state. And these companies selling tree urns, it's just a separate compartment underneath where the plant grows. So it has to have those nutrients to grow, and without them, you're just killing a plant, which I feel like is really that would be very traumatic, that the tree that you're trying to grow from your loved one dies.
Just dies. Aww. That
know?
is kind of sad. If that does happen, you can just dig up the cremains and try something else. They're still going to be there. They're ashes. They're not going anywhere anytime soon.
So keep in mind, spreading a small amount over the ground or mixing it into the soil is fine. But if you're using an entire a big person's worth of cremated remains, you definitely have to take extra steps so that your green thumb doesn't turn into a black one.
And that's my soapbox. I'm stepping off it right now.
Now it's time for me to get on the soapbox.
Okay.
So our next option, I feel like I've been hearing more and more people talk about without knowing anything about it. So as a person covered in tattoos, I feel like I have to put my 2 cents in here. So a lot of people have talked about getting cremated remains mixed into tattoo ink that is being, maybe like a memorial tattoo or whatever have you. And this has to be done in a very certain way for it to be safe. Tattoos themselves are already a very complicated process. Your artists have to go to a lot of classes to be able to do this and get their certifications to even tattoo you. So you should definitely treat this as a medical procedure and not just something you can do willy-nilly. So the safe way to do this is that there are companies that you can ship cremated remains to. They will sterilize those cremated remains and make them into nanogranules. And those then will be bonded to a tattoo ink that they ship back to you, and then you can use it at a studio. So when I say sterilize, you might think, well, didn't somebody already get sterilized through cremation? Technically, yes. Cremated remains are sterile. However, if you think about you have them placed into a bag or an urn, those things are no longer sterile. Those things that they come in contact with make the cremated remains unsterile.
Also, just the tools that crematory employees use to process them. They go through a grinder. They have a little scooper that they scoop everything out with. It's not sterile. It's not a sterile medical environment.
Absolutely not. And no self-respecting artist would just take a pinch of cremated remains and drop it into the ink reservoir. The ashes, first of all, the ashes are way too large anyway.
Yeah, they're crunchy.
Yeah, they're huge. Even if you were to mortar and pestle them, it's still on a molecular level, considering that you have to have the ink shoved into your skin with needles, there's no way that cremated remains would make it through your skin. The risk of infection and rejection of the actual piece, if done improperly, it's astronomical. Please do not do this. Please do not ask for this.
Yeah, unless you do it the right way, which, it does sound a little dangerous. You still have to be careful, and you have to really be careful about infection and stuff like that. But I think I've talked about tattoos before on this podcast in a different episode. But what tattoos are, and I love describing it, is that your little, you have tiny little cells in your skin called macrophages, and they see the ink getting injected into your skin, and they go, this is foreign, this is dangerous, and they eat it all up as fast as they can, and then they stay stained because the ink stains them, and that's how your tattoos stay on your skin forever. So if there's huge chunks of ash getting injected to your skin, it's just going to get pushed out by your skin. Your little macrophages aren't going to be able to eat the ashes. So really it's just pointless. It's useless. You don't even have the ashes in your skin anymore at that point. So definitely go about doing it the right way.
And you should research your shop before just barging in and handing like an artist a bottle of ink with cremated remains in it. This is a permanent and semi-surgical process, and that should be considered very carefully by you and the trained and certified professional that you're contracting with. So now I will step off my soapbox.
Yay. Now we can get back to some fun, lighthearted stuff.
It wouldn't be an episode of MortMic if one of us wasn't complaining about something, though, honestly.
Oh, goodness. I've heard of this one before, getting made into a coral reef. So blah, 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 cremated remains are carbon. They are the skeleton of life or whatever. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, cremains can act as sort of like a conduit for kind of like a marine safe condition in which like coral reefs can grow on. So I've definitely like seen videos about this before. Red, I don't know if you've dug up any more information about this.
Yeah, definitely. So how we've already kind of mentioned that cremated remains go really well with mixing into things. These companies will create a concrete mixture that cremated remains are then added to that they would just form into a big old reef ball, and that would get taken out into the ocean to become a coral reef.
And that's really cool. I really like that because it's like conservation effort as well as like being memorialized in a way.
Yeah.
Definitely better than the tree pod, in my opinion.
Definitely better than the tree pod. And the cool thing about companies like this is that they like to give families the options to be involved as much as they'd like and as much as they're comfortable with this process. So some of the ones I was looking at, like they'll even like invite you to the mixing, so you can put the cremated remains into the mixture. You can leave like handprints on the wet form of the ball, the reef ball. I even saw like some that let you put things into the reef ball as long as they're like okay to be in the water, which is really cool. They would, of course, then invite you to be present for the placement and the dedication of the reef ball. So when they take it out into the water, like you can have a little ceremony of it being placed, which is really nice. And of course, like Jem said, these reefs help establish little homes for sea critters. And like, what's cuter than that?
Definitely a cute way to go out. Cutest final disposition ever.
But if your loved one was the type of person that had a huge personality that just was super explosive and, encompassed the room that they were in, maybe something a little more grand would be up their alley. So why not have them become a firework?
Wow, that's like scattering ashes times 1,000. That's like extreme scattering ashes. I like it.
Exactly. It's really awesome because either you can send the cremated remains to the company to be made into like a big fireworks display, or they'll actually send like self-made kits that you can add the cremated remains to yourself before you send them up into the night sky.
That's kind of terrifying. That's like, how do you build a bomb territory?
We promise we're not perpetrating any anarchist cookbook concepts of this.
Cremain fireworks, not cremain bombs.
Yeah, right. Along the same line, there's the option to have cremated remains made into bullets. A company I found will actually make you like a case of ammunition, whether it's for shooting skeet, game hunting, and like home protection if that floats your boat. And you can incorporate the cremated remains on one last hunting trip.
I know a lot of people who this would be a very appealing option for, but to me, this is like the beginnings of like, like a weird like murder mystery, like romance novel. It's like Jenny shot Derek in the face with her ex-husband's ash bullet. That's the only thing that I can think of, unfortunately. I don't hunt, guys, in case you didn't know.
But I think you're right. This definitely appeals to a very wide range of people. The amount of like, we had from our cremation necklace catalog, there was a bullet, like a little like fake bullet that you could put cremated remains in. We sold that like hotcakes. Like so many people bought that.
Yeah. Yep, dude. Out here in the rural parts, there's a big market for that, I'm sure.
Definitely. Something else that I thought was kind of interesting, another thing actually that my funeral home has worked with another company to do. There's only one company that does it. They use this real complicated process to solidify the cremated remains again after someone's cremated, and they solidify them into these like stones that give you like a non-messy form of memorialization of the cremated remains, that you can like actually hold these stones and like touch them and feel them. And it's easy to, share with people if you wanted to like give a stone to somebody else in the family or friends so they can have a piece with them, and you can keep them forever as like a touchstone, or you can skip it on the waves and to scatter them. Like it's really complicated process as they explained it to us. I kind of zoned out during that webinar.
Oh no.
But I thought it was really cool because at the end of it, I mean, you get like for, 7-8 pounds of cremated remains, you get a ton of these little stones, and like how they're going to look is different for everybody. The size, the color, if there's like cracks or bubbles in them, like they're all different and unique to that person because of, yet again, their chemical makeup. So very, very, very cool concept, I thought.
I kind of like how simple it is, because all of these like crazy boisterous ideas are great for some people, but sometimes you just want something that you can hold that is the person, but it's not like a box of ashes. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
exactly.
I really do like how like simple and like tactile that is, really.
And honestly, it wasn't very expensive. I think it's like $600 for it. And when you think about it, like you're not purchasing an urn. Like an urn would cost you like $500. So in reality, like it's really not that much more expensive.
Yeah, that's a really good option for the simpler folk.
So we
on the opposite end of it.
have one more option for you guys. And I had to wrap up with this as the last one because it was too hilarious not to. I came across this by accident, and I'm super glad that I did. So, are those cold and lonely nights after losing your spouse getting too hard to bear? Do you roll over to empty bed sheets and feel the pangs of loss in more way than one? Well, look no further, because when the consumer demands, the market supplies. Vibrator urns are here to fill that space that your loved one used to.
Get it, girl.
Like, I actually searched for this on my work computer.
Wow.
Rest in peace, my IT guys, if they ever have to like dig into my history.
Hey, this is a business place. We're practicing business.
I have to know all the options for the families that I serve.
For my clients. Wow. I mean, I have also seen this before in some like lost article, but this is, definitely a real thing. You should Google it. It's a very interesting looking item. Basically what they do, and Red, you can correct me, is that they take the ashes and they put them into a compartment within the dildo. Yes. So it's like encased in the dildo, and they're just like in there. So it's not like the cremains are mixed in or anything like that. They're just in a compartment inside of the sex toy.
Basically. And granted, like what I was able to find on this, it seemed mostly conceptual. It looked like it had been produced for like the concept of it, like to show that they were like they could do it and they made it. I didn't see it for like mass purchase, but I'm sure plenty of those glass blowers that we mentioned earlier could take on a project of this magnitude.
Yeah, definitely a more adventurous option out there. I'm sure there are some people that would really love this option. But definitely just something that is really interesting that it exists. And yep, you're right. If there's a demand for it, there will by golly be a way that it can be provided.
What was that Jurassic Park quote that like really conceptualizes this perfectly? Like your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Oh no. Well, everyone has to have their own personal touch for their final disposition. That's for sure.
I think so. We all want to leave our mark on the world, whether it's during life or death. So, I know that a lot of these processes sound like they can be a bit on the expensive side to a lot of you guys, like costing thousands of dollars to memorialize a loved one in a unique way. But if you think about the cost of like a full traditional burial, like the vault, the plot, opening and closing of the grave, and a headstone, I mean, it's honestly pretty comparable to that, if not still on the cheaper end. So don't gawk at them too much. And it's, of course, not something you have to do right away. Cremated remains are around for as long as you keep them. So it's always something you can do when you have more funds down the road.
And cremains are certainly not going anywhere. Cremation is on the rise and will continue to be on the rise. I think it's actually in the majority now versus traditional burials in some areas.
60% and climbing.
Mm-hmm. And, because it's, more accessible, cheaper, these are ways that, a loved one can be memorialized if you don't have a lot of money or if you don't have the immediate funds to provide like a traditional full ceremony. A lot of these options could be for you. And there still are a lot out there that we didn't even touch on.
Definitely. The one thing I will say with all these things in mind, always have a plan for your cremated remains, because cremation is just the first part of the disposition. It's not the final end all be all. You can't just keep cremating family members and stuffing them in a closet hoping that your great-great-great-grandkids are going to have the same connection to your loved ones as you do. So always have a plan in mind for them, whether it is to bury them, is to scatter them, or one of the other options. Always have a plan. Don't just stop at cremation.
And thank you so much for all of those who have donated in our fundraiser to keep our podcast on our hosting sites for another year. We really appreciate you guys. This has been so awesome. We're planning on doing a little more individualized thank you in the month to come, but we just wanted to say thank you so much for your support financially and otherwise. Thank you.
But that's going to be it for us this week on MortMic. We'd love to connect with you guys on our socials, so like, follow, and subscribe to us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at MortMic Podcast. It would mean a lot to hear your feedback, so please tell us what you think in a comment and drop us a rating on whatever podcast hosting site that you use. If you have any suggestions on topics or found your own really unique way to memorialize somebody's cremated remains, we'd love to hear about it in an email at mortmicpodcast@gmail.com.
I also want to give a huge thank you to our friend Marcin for the use of his song titled Deputies of Death, which he produced just for our show. You can check out his Bandcamp at marcinmusic.bandcamp.com. Thank you, Marcin.
Be sure to tune in the first Thursday of every month for some more casual discussions on death. Thank you so much for listening. This has been MortMic.
Bye.
Bye.